Hello, Alison.
Hello.
Welcome to Gentle and Brutal. So, Alison, midwife, havening practitioner, havening trainer, author, also ancestral healing as well, I believe.
Yep,
Yes, amazing. So, thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for doing this.
you're
So,
welcome.
can you
Pleasure
tell
to
me
be
a little bit about what led you down this path that you've taken, kind of any bits along your journey that really kind of help explain who you are today in terms of, having done so much and contributed
here.
so much. Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about your journey?
Yeah. Perfect. Yes. So, well, it all started at my birth, really, Jenna. I mean, I'm not going to go my whole life story, but basically, I was born to a mother who had lost two babies before me, and I think that's really set the template for my life. I feel like I came in healing the wounds of the mother, and when I have, explored it in more recent years, what is part of my mission here, which is to heal the wounds of the mother. Um, and, uh, and I'm sure there'll be parts of it that will relate back to my birth. But I always came in feeling like I was a helper. Even as a small child, I would, knock on old ladies' doors and ask them if they needed me to buy cat food or do their shopping or walk their dog. Or so it was a kind of life. It was a life like that, really, of helping. And from about 14, I always, and I would look after all the babies on the street. So I was very attuned to babies. I really loved babies. And I was about 14 and I thought, I really want to be a midwife. I didn't know why. No one else had ever been a midwife in my family. And it was just always with me. And then I didn't do very well at school. So I didn't have the qualifications. I became a nanny and I was still really thinking I really do want to be a midwife. So I had to do some extra tests and everything. I had to do some extra GCSEs at night school to get in, and I was delighted when I got in. And of course, I thought I was doing midwifery because I loved babies, but actually, what you realise when you start midwifery is not a job you do because you love babies. You do it because you love women and mothers, and that was a huge shift in my understanding.
So you began so you were
Yeah,
in midwifery and you realized that that is when you don't get into it for babies, you're into it for the mothers.
yeah, into it for the mothers. And I was in a group of women who were in their 50s, so sort of age I am now. And it was quite challenging the midwifery training because they just went on and on about how awful it was for women. And I was young, I was like 24, had no idea really. And I thought they were all making a big I didn't stay that long in midwifery as we know it. I did it for a few years and then I had my family and I had a lot of breastfeeding issues with my first daughter. And um, that really led me down another path. I thought, why is this so hard? This has been so difficult. And I realized I didn't actually know much then at all. And the th information I would have given women at, at that time when I was so young, now I just think I'm gonna roll over in shame, how much experience gives you. You learn so much more by, the older you get, really. So anyway, I went down this path. I became an NCT breastfeeding counsellor and a lactation consultant. And really, a lot of the work in that, and then I worked around my children. I did some shift work, but I didn't work as a full-time midwife really after that because I always fitted it in around my children. And what I realized, I was obviously when you're doing breastfeeding support, you're listening to lots of stories, and lots of the stories were really traumatizing, birth trauma stories. And then this link between birth trauma and the breastfeeding issues, it all started to like pieces of the puzzle were all kind of coming together over the years. And then I think I must have put it out to the universe that I needed something to help these women because I was offering breastfeeding support, which sometimes helped and sometimes not. And I thought, no, there's something deeper going on here. And wouldn't it be really good to have a tool that you can just kind of use when you're at the visit and the trauma goes, thinking, how will I ever find that? Anyway, I didn't look for Havening. Havening found me. I went along to a demonstration locally to home. It was an introduction that was happening. And when I witnessed it, I just thought that I have to learn because that is it. Because I saw the transformation before my eyes with one demonstration. And I thought I really do have to, I just have to learn how to do that. I just have to learn how to do that. That's going to be the thing. Because before that, I would just listen, acknowledge how they felt, and then refer to therapy if I felt that that's what they needed. Anyway, I then went a few days later, I joined the training and was blown away. I had a bit of a, what would you say, a bit of a, forgotten the term. But anyway, it wasn't the best evening. It left me feeling like I couldn't, something looking so simple, I couldn't even do it because the woman I was working with become very triggered,
Okay.
which meant that I became really triggered because I felt so shamed and like this looks so easy and how could it be that easy? You can't even do that, and all this kind of voice, this old voice about how stupid you are and all this kind of thing, and almost didn't come back on the second day.
Gosh.
But I did. I was convinced to come back by our dear
This
friend
was your
Louise.
havening training, not your havening practice. This is your
So this was
practitioner.
to become a practitioner, yeah, because I'd
Okay.
seen how amazing it was. But honestly, it was a baptism of fire. I almost didn't come back the second day. I came back and I could see, I was in tears the whole time because I was really feeling what the people that were having the demonstration, could just feel the power, but
Yeah.
then feeling this sense of, yeah, but I couldn't even distract somebody. And it was partly that they were triggered by the distract, which we didn't know about, all of this stuff. Anyway.
Yeah.
Um, and one of the things that was said on that day, it just happened to be that it was a day around childbirth and tocophobia, which is the fear of childbirth. It just, how the universe just lines up. It's like I was
Oh
really
yeah.
meant to be. There were several talks, and it was obviously all about that. So anyway, I was there for the 3 days of the integration day, the third day, and somebody said, her name is escaped me right now, but she said, well, if it doesn't work, what you can do is just take people back to their own in utero experience. Now, as a midwife, I was like, you
Ding
can
ding
do
ding.
what? Ding, 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 ding. You can do what? You can take people back to your in utero experience. So I was fascinated, and I did actually have that experience myself, and the power was just amazing. And I actually use that a lot in my work. The other thing that had happened on the second day after my hideous first day, a woman came and sat next to me, and she said, I hope you don't mind, she said, but I've sat here for a reason today. And she said, it's because I want you to heal my birth trauma. And I was like, me? Did you see the hash I made of it yesterday? No, 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 I can't do that. Anyway, I got some help from one of the facilitators, and she went back into the group after like 20 minutes. She got very, very activated. I was thinking, I'm really glad I asked for help. They helped me. And then we went back into the main group, and she shared that she did have a birth trauma, but now she doesn't have it anymore. And so for the rest of the 2 days, I was like, are you sure? Go back again. Get yourself back in the room. Can you go? And she couldn't. She just said, no, I've now just got that beautiful image of me and my baby. So, although it was a baptism of fire, I realized the power of havening. So then I started to work with more women that were on their, at that time, more women on their pregnancy journeys, um, and postnatal, obviously, helping to heal birth trauma. But I was also using it for myself because I realized that all of that crying was all basically I was being triggered. And all the stuff I had buried through my childhood, through my teenagehood, was all coming to the surface. And then I had havening to help. So it meant that I went on my own personal journey. And of course, although healing can be very painful, when you're on the other side of it, it is amazing. So I feel like I was probably going around with very, very heavy backpacks of suppressed trauma that I didn't even know was there. And suddenly the backpack came off, and it's like I grew wings. And then all this other stuff started to happen, which was more of well, it was really like an awakening. I wasn't carrying that trauma, so it just made space for who I truly was, really. And
Yeah.
I had no understanding of that before. I had no trauma before that.
Yes. And it's a funny word, right? I mean,
Yeah,
when you say to people, if you use the word trauma, they're like, well, I don't have any trauma. And you're like, okay, that's absolutely fine.
yeah,
Did anything happen that made you upset when you were a child? And they're like, well, and then they start listing off some of the most
yeah,
hugest things you've ever heard of. And I think sometimes we run the risk of thinking of trauma as things like war
yeah,
and like the biggest things that our minds can think of, and actually it can be as simple as feeling humiliated in your classroom because you've put your hand
yeah,
up for something. I mean,
yeah,
it's so
yeah,
broad, the term.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
yeah, thank you for sharing that. What a journey that led
What a
you that
journey. What a journey. So then I thought, well, you might ask me a question in a minute, but I thought about writing a book actually. And it wasn't really about, it was a bit about that, but it was more about breastfeeding. I had 25 years of experience, supporting women in breastfeeding. And then this little trauma piece that was there as well. I thought it'd be a great book. We'll get to the underlying feelings of why breastfeeding doesn't always, because all the books are written about what to do if you've got mastitis, what to do if you've got, sore nipples or whatever. And this was about why are you having that? What's underneath all of that? Which is still it's still in my mind, but that wasn't a book I
it
started to
wasn't
write.
what came out of you, was it?
No.
Do you want to speak a little bit about what you did produce?
Yeah, okay. So I had it in my mind I'd start writing this breastfeeding book. I thought it's time now. I would just kind of get into a bit of a meditative state, just quietly, just come to my heart and then just start writing. So it was like pages and pages, no mistakes, just pages and pages and pages and pages and pages of A4 sheets. And then I'd read it back and think, well, this isn't about breastfeeding. It was the most bizarre thing. I had no idea. Of course, now I know it was automatic writing, it was being channeled, but I didn't know anything about any of that. So I got very curious about where the messages were coming from, and then I had to kind of sit in meditation. And around the similar time, I was going to birth. I was working as an independent midwife from 2014 to about 2020. And I actually had done Reiki, but I started to hear the voices of babies when I was at births. And it was more than my intuition, which would be, I would just tell her to get up and move to the bathroom or, get her to lift her leg or whatever. But these messages were really clear. Things like she needs to move her left leg so that I've got more space to get out. And then I'd be like, okay, so then I said, why don't you just lift your left leg and then pull the baby will just come out? That person needs to leave the room. We need to go and be in the bathroom. This kind of thing, which was more than my intuition. It was more than that, but again couldn't describe, couldn't explain it. And I thought, well, it must be happening for a reason. And then, of course, I started to write the book, and that was obviously the reason I needed to have those experiences. And also, I'd been doing havening for a while, taking people back to their in utero experience, discovering that, gosh, don't we remember, our in utero experience and our birth experience. It's held in our bodies. We don't remember it physically, but our bodies remember it. There was kind of all this information leading up to the book. And some of the stuff in the book I had never heard of. And I thought, I better look this up because I don't know about this. No one's going to believe me. Um, and then, of course, it was more of so what I'd say the book that was produced was basically a mix of science and spirituality, really, bringing the two together around pregnancy and birth particularly, and it was written, and I thought I can't possibly just put a book out which has got messages from spirit babies. Like, who are spirit babies? There was all this whole questioning thing going on, and people are going to think I'm mad, yeah. And then I thought, I know what I'll do. I will look at some of this stuff and see if there's any research for any of it. And then to my surprise, there was this whole science, which was pre and perinatal psychology. And I thought, how have I been a midwife this long and I have not heard of pre and perinatal psychology? Because this stuff really matters. Anyway, so I was basing it all really on my experiences of taking people back to their in utero experience, thinking that, oh my goodness, this is amazing, and realizing there was a whole science that had been dedicated to it for the like 40 years before. So so it ended up having some of that in the book, and I put the references in, and then I thought, okay, it's probably ready. But then when I'd written it, I said to the publisher, okay, I've written it, but actually, I don't really want to put it in the world. And she was like, no, you've written it now. You have to put it in the world. But it was quite a challenge because I just thought people are going to think I'm crazy.
That was my question. What was the obstacle? Because I'm imagining going from, so I started in forensics, so I started
Mm,
in kind of, science. And
yeah,
when I think about being a midwife, it's academic and medical, and it's very specifically science
yeah,
based, right?
yeah.
So was one of your obstacles like how did you square that circle to move and blend in the science and the spirituality? What was that like for you as an author?
Well, I think originally because I had just the messages from the babies, I thought there's no way, there's no way. You're going to have to do something else with this. There's just no way. So then I got the references, about 400 references in it for stuff that was in the book. So I was like, okay, that's fine. But then it was the fear of bringing it out and how will I be received? people will actually think I'm crazy. And I did have real fears, not sleeping at night with the fear of taking that book out into the world. They would take away my registration. I'd never work again. I might even be dead by this time next year. They were real fears. It was quite terrifying. And it was, yeah, it was, oh yeah, it was like it was in my whole body. Like the fear was in my whole body. And then the only thing that I could do to calm myself, I mean, I had havening. Thank goodness I had havening because when the fear would come up, I could just haven the fear and then create a new image. And so I did a lot of havening in the weeks leading up to the launch of the book because I did just think, just people are just going to think I'm bonkers. They really will think I'm crazy. And it was, and of course, look, here we are, 2.5 years later, I'm still alive. I still have my midwifery registration. It's like nothing happened. So the fear was so huge, but actually nothing happened. And I expected, oh, people would write terrible comments, and there's been a few, but actually, the picture I had built beforehand was so much more a bigger, awful picture. And I had my book launch, and people were very kind and loving, even if they didn't really understand spirit babies. People were really understanding. And, it has created a bit of a ripple in my family. I think they really do think I'm a bit bonkers, but the thing that really kept me was if this book makes a difference for one person, then it's worth being out there. It's worth all of those painstaking hours if it makes a difference to one person. And then actually, the editor had experienced a lot of what I'd written about in the book. And
Okay.
so, this really made me cry. But when she finished editing it, she left a comment and said, editing this book has been so healing, and I don't feel I've got birth trauma anymore. And I just thought,
Well,
oh
there's
my
your one
goodness me.
person. I'm done.
And there's your one person. So then where was the one person? I thought it's not even out there. And the way that feeling of like it's made such a difference to one person, and I was like, you sure? You sure?
Joy.
And she just said no. And so what I realized the book is really it's a bit of a transmission. I've
Yes.
realized over time it's more of a transmission. And it really is, it's messages. The babies were giving me direct messages for their mothers on their fertility, pregnancy, and birth journeys about what it is that they wanted. And I
Mm.
still wasn't really sure what it was all about, but I thought I've obviously been given it for a reason, so I better just get on with it and just do it, which
Yeah.
is what I did.
Yes, you did. My
Yeah,
goodness.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
a real soul-bearing exercise, isn't it, writing a book?
Yeah, really. I mean, it's
It's a
maybe
real
put me off
journey.
about writing another one, but then I think there are more books in there, but it's just because and you're telling a part of your own personal story as well. But more for me, it was the fear, the self-doubt of just people would just, I just, no one's ever going to speak to me again, that kind of thing. But I think what happened is there was a change. The fear was huge. I did the work around the fear, and then the fear of not bringing it out
Ah,
started to
yes.
because I knew then I haven't been given it for no reason. There's a reason, and I didn't know the reason at the time why that was, and it's still unfolding, 2.5 years later as to why I brought that book out. But
Mm.
I know now.
But it start to, this is what I'm experiencing with my book. It starts to feel like a disservice if I don't do this.
Yeah,
I'm doing
absolutely.
it. I'm doing a disservice and I'm doing myself a disservice if I don't
Yeah.
finish this. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then when you start to get people, people still email me, send messages on Instagram to say, I read your book, you changed my life. It made such a difference. I've come to terms with how everything was. I mean, that is priceless, and if you make it I mean, my goal was to make a difference to one woman, which I'd done before it was out there, and it's continued to do that, in
Amazing.
a way I could never have expected. The
Mm,
image of and the picture of what I had was it's never, no one's ever going to understand what you've written.
no.
But those that are ready for it, they are finding, peace from the book,
Yeah,
which is
absolutely.
what can't ask for more than that, really.
No, amazing. And it's a topic, motherhood, birth, labor, being pregnant, losing a baby,
Mm,
losing a pregnancy. These are topics, I think women's health in general is something that is vastly under-resourced generally across the board. Um, what would you say, what would you say about where we need to go with our womanhood, I'm going to say, just to branch the whole thing, because it's everything from your body changing when you're tiny into beginning your periods, the decisions that you make about contraception because they are on you as a female, all the way through deciding to have children or not, if you then do, have a miscarriage or an abortion. All the way through the pregnancies, the labors, postpartum life, and then of course the other side of it, going into perimenopause and menopause and the changes that are there. Is there anything that, I mean, I just said a lot there, but is there anything in that I mean, obviously we know you're very passionate about the midwifery side of it
Yeah.
and lactation and these kinds of things, but generally, broader speaking, what would your message be? What needs to change? What would you see happen?
Well, I think it's about bringing back some of the ancient ways in a modern culture.
Oh, amazing. Tell me, tell me.
And well, firstly, I feel like we have to go back to the beginning. And
Okay.
I think what the evidence is very clear that the way that we are conceived, the way that we're carried in utero, and the way that we're birthed sets a template for our lifetime. The evidence is very clear about that. And that is about how we act, how we behave, and how we feel in the world. All goes back to that. So that's my kind of key thing is like we've got to go back, we've got to heal birth, we've got to heal birth because the patterns are set for life until we change them. You're not stuck with them forever.
No,
We just got an opportunity to change. And that's the beauty of healing is that you have the opportunity. You don't have to heal it if you don't want to. But if you really do, there's always opportunities to heal. That's firstly. And then the other
beautiful.
thing I feel is, we have become so disconnected. That's my key thing, disconnected. Disconnected from our inner wisdom, disconnected to our ancestors, disconnected to our bodies. And it's this disconnection piece and then disconnection to the spirit of our children, even before that, even before life. So for me, it is all about healing birth because we are carrying going back to healing the womb because we're holding all of those patriarchal stories in our bodies with nowhere to express them. I feel passionate really about reclaiming our rites of passage. So the
Yes.
way that we're born, what our first menstruation is like, what it's like, through childbirth. Because as a midwife, and I've seen it over the years, that women carry many traumas that often get exposed in the birthing room.
Okay.
So women who've had, sexual trauma particularly
Yes,
can expose
absolutely.
itself now, nobody's really talking about this.
No.
But as a midwife, that's what I often see. And if I'm brave enough to ask the women, I used to be terrified to ask the women
Yeah,
because no one's asking them that. They're asking all kinds of other questions because the sexual trauma can play out in birth. We're
absolutely. And
talking about the
lactation.
womb and the sexual organs. Yeah, all of it. All of it it's all connected, but we're not really talking about it. And I think it's the fear of triggering people. But people often, if they have the understanding, then that's what's more healing is the understanding. Oh, now I understand why that happened. Because I always felt, and when I learned havening and I was using havening for birth trauma, I thought, the birth trauma is actually the icing on the cake. There is so much underneath it that's not coming from the birth. It's showing itself in the birth. And somehow in our society, to have birth trauma is more acceptable than to talk about a sexual trauma you might have had when you were 13, for example.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, it's all kind of trauma based, I suppose. But
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean, it is reclaiming their rites of passage, and then like celebrating motherhood, not having baby showers, but celebrating motherhood. We have a
Mother.
celebration for the mother with her female friends and ancestors, and their mothers and grandmothers, holding the space for them as they walk the journey, like so millions of women have done before. And it's about bringing that sacred back to pregnancy and birth because that's the piece we've lost. It's become so medicalized, it's become pathologized. It's not the, normal body function. It's seeing it so much more now. And of course, this is not to rule out the fact that some women will need intervention, some women will
Absolutely.
need, but not at the rates that we're seeing it
No.
currently,
And
you
we
know.
know, don't we, from the science, if that's your, because sometimes we need the science to believe in it, but we know that as soon as we move from, for example, home into a hospital setting, that it changes the process of labor and stuff. So it's not just the more kind
No.
of what I would say the fluffier side, the more spiritual side of this. We know that this is not because it's a hospital.
Yeah, exactly.
It's where you go
Exactly.
when you're poorly, right? In
Yeah.
there's a lot of vibration around that as a hospital. So one of the things I was saying, if and when I can, I'm hoping it will be 2020 2026, but it might be later. I'd like to set up a separate place in societies, maybe in counties, where people
Mm,
can go when they've had a miscarriage,
yeah.
because the amount of people that I've seen who have got in who they know that their baby has died and
Mm,
or their pregnancy has ended, just depending on where they are and how they word it, obviously. And they're sitting in the waiting room in the hospital watching mummies with their babies and hearing women in labor, and it seems to be not that they don't work straight away on the fact that they had a miscarriage. They work on how they were treated and where they had to go and what they had to do because they had a miscarriage. And it's usually that setting that seems to be so massively triggering. If you are listening to this and you are feeling triggered, please do gently rub your hands together, maybe go and have a cup of tea, distract yourself, and come back to this if this is something that you want to do. But yeah, it's so reclaiming, reconnecting, re is sacratizing a word? I'm gonna have it anyway.
yeah, but it is, isn't it? It's about trying to bring back the sacredness, you know, birth, because the other thing we've got in our society is like birth is a sexual event. It's like it's sexual and everybody's trying to avoid it, We're
Yeah,
using sex organs, they come out of the
yeah,
sex organs,
yeah,
baby. And it's just sometimes changing the language because some of the language is very negative,
yeah,
things like failure to progress or incompetent cervix. I mean, who wants that? Nobody
yeah.
wants that.
I
It's
remember my
and
nan
usually,
saying
yeah,
she had an immature womb, that she kept getting told she had an immature womb, and she said she thinks that's why it took her three days to get her firstborn out.
yeah. I mean, that's the thing. The language is so important. And if you keep on telling someone that, then they start to believe it.
Yeah,
Yeah. Women need to feel safe to give birth.
yeah.
And of course, in our culture, the safest place they say is the safest place is in hospital. But, it's often not like that. It doesn't feel safe and secure there because people are coming in and interrupting. If you think about birth as making love, if you've got many interruptions, people coming in to look for the keys, people asking, oh, is so and so in here? It's just like it's not going to happen. It's that flow of oxytocin and all those feel-good hormones that we need for birthing. And when they're not
Mm,
there, which very often they're not in hospital, it's not conducive to feeling safe, which is the key thing about birthing, is to you have to feel safe. And
feel
your
safe.
nervous system has to feel it. Like not just you saying, oh, I feel safe. Does your nervous system feel safe? Because if your nervous system doesn't feel safe, you cannot produce the hormones for birthing. You're more
Mm.
likely to produce cortisol and adrenaline, which are the stress hormones.
And they're going to
So
slow
therefore,
everything down.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, much to change, Jenna.
Much to change. And you're right, the words that we use. And you mentioned briefly there about sexualization. I remember one lady was like, I can't possibly breastfeed. My breasts are, my husband's sexual pleasure,
Mm,
and everything about my breasts are to do with,
yeah,
sex. And I can't put my sex object, my, part of my
yeah,
body that's for sex, into my baby's mouth. That's disgusting. And I
yeah,
was like, okay, what would you like to do with that? Like, do you want to keep that? Do you want to transform that into something else? And, it's the words that we use and the words that we take on and take in are so
mm,
important. So
yeah.
give me some of the words that you would use instead. So you gave me three examples. You said incompetent cervix. What would you have instead?
Oh gosh. Um, I've had words for these before and I've got complete blank now.
That's all right, because I can add them in, we can do a post on
Mm,
them. But
okay.
it's a great question, isn't it? To start to think about
Yeah.
what are the types of words that would serve us rather than
Yeah.
hinder us in
Yeah.
our,
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking of the word like the word contraction. You know, we all use the word contraction, but what about expansion?
oh, well, that
You're
sounds
expanding,
much
because that's what you're doing is
yes.
expanding, expanding. Call them expansions, not contractions.
Oh my
You know,
goodness.
failure to progress is not failure to progress. That's the failure of the medical system to provide a safe environment. You know, I'm not sure about the cervix one. I don't think about that one, but
Yeah,
there's just a few examples of just
beautiful.
changing the wording. That is, I mean, contractions is a big one, isn't it? Because you're expanding actually. You have to expand
Yes.
to get the baby out, not
Yes,
contract.
yes, we're waiting
Yeah.
for that dilation of the cervix, and
Yeah.
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
it makes perfect sense. They're quite and I'm not moving into blame or anything, but they're quite masculine words, aren't they,
Yeah.
to describe something that. So I think there is a huge space here for us to have a reframe of some of these terms. I think this is a really beautiful place to start. Absolutely, yeah. I remember one lady came to me and she said, can I work, and this is going to be a question in a second for you, can you work with me when I'm pregnant? And I said, I can work very gently with you and I can give you some really amazing tips, but we're not going to be doing anything activating. And she said, well, it's actually going to really affect my labor. And I said, in that case, in the last trimester, I think I'm right in saying this and you'll correct me
Mm.
if I'm
Mm.
wrong, in the last trimester we can have a look at having you know excuse me, some resolution for that. Can I ask, what do you know what specifically it is? And she said, all of my midwife and my doctor keep telling me that my hips are too narrow for me to get my baby out naturally. And I'm
Mm.
like,
Happens all the time, Jenna. Your baby's too big, your baby's too small, your pelvis is too big, your pelvis is too small, your legs are too short, all the time, all the time. If you
I was
don't take your
told
baby out, your
I
baby's
was
going to
told my
die.
baby's too big. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it just, it's just, you know, deal with it when it happens. It's just like it's just what it's doing in my experience, because since COVID, they seem to have lowered the threshold for induction as well.
Okay.
So they keep on, lots of people are saying, at 38 weeks, they're having discussions about induction. Now, I've been a midwife for a long time. We never had talks about induction till 41 weeks. So these
Okay.
poor women are being stressed out from 38 weeks about being induced. And if you don't get induced, something might happen to your baby. You don't want that, do you? I mean, no mother wants that, but they're using it as a scare tactic, which is
Yeah.
not okay. That's not
Yes.
okay, you
Yes.
know. And
And there's a lot of that.
there's a lot of that. And then they quote these statistics that if you go past 41 weeks, whatever, your baby's 50% more chance of dying. It's not. It goes from 1 in 1,000 to 2 in 1,000. That's not 50%. So
No.
they're not even giving the right information. But when you say that to a parent, you've got a 50% chance your baby's going to die. What 50% you're going to take? So, it's incorrect information. It's, 1 in 1,000 to 2 in 1,000. For me, that's a risk worth taking,
Yeah.
you know? But, and that's the problem. There's so much coercion, which is why we're in the state we're in. And
Yeah.
so part of my role, I feel, is if I can really help women to trust their intuition, like, is it your true no or your true yes? But when you say your true yes, that you want to have it or you don't want to have it, you're coming from a place where you're ready to accept the consequence of whatever it is you decide. And you
Yes.
take responsibility for that. And
Yes.
that's the thing I think we don't have in we don't want to take responsibility for it. We want the doctor to tell us, we want the
Yes.
midwife to tell us.
Yes.
But we're not the one who's got to live the consequences of the decision.
They're not. No, we are.
Exactly. Exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Exactly. So
So
that's
more
important.
connection, more responsibility, and a reframe for some of the very unhelpful phrases and words that we use
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
motherhood.
Absolutely.
In yeah, beautiful. Oh my God, this is so helpful. Yeah. Okay. And in your experience working with people who are suffering, would you say that some of the deepest roots of suffering might come from birth? I didn't know myself until I'd re kind of processed and havened my own birth that I was afraid to come out because my father was extraordinarily aggressive. And I knew that, apparently I knew that in the womb. And I was like, I don't want to come out. And
Yeah.
subsequently, I was like, Mum, how was my birth? She said, Oh, of all my five children, you just was like, nope, not coming out, not helping me, and you were the toughest pregnancy, the toughest labor. And it's like, gosh, that's interesting, isn't it? That I'm being
Yeah.
told in my session that I didn't want to come out, and my mum's just now telling me that actually I
Yeah.
was the toughest pregnancy. I mean,
Yeah. I mean, obviously, as I said before, I take people back to their in utero experience, and this is the kind of things that you see, and what you realize is that those small babies, they take on the emotions of the mother. So whatever's happening in her environment, they're experiencing all of it because they're connected. So
yeah,
they're experiencing all of it. So if she's got any fears about it, or chances are you're like, I'm not sure how safe it is out there.
yeah,
Especially, if you're because you will have picked up in utero that there's violence going on the outside.
yes,
And
yeah,
so why would you want to come? You know? So,
yes.
and I've seen that time and time again where things are not great on the outside, and babies are picking it up. So what we do when I'm doing the havening is that we like clear those emotions because they've often carried them and they're not even theirs. Potentially, you may have been carrying your own mother's fears around
Yeah,
bringing another baby into this, who knows? And so
absolutely.
why would you not want to come out, Why would you not want to come out? Makes
100%.
total sense. Yeah. But I see that time and time again in the work that I do, Jenna, of how much we play out. So, if you're induced, like you're being forced, they are children often that do not want to be forced. They don't want to be forced. You can't force them to do anything, those children.
Oh
It's
my
a pattern does.
goodness.
Huh? Similarly, babies that if they're born by cesarean, I've had some born by cesarean myself, that they can't finish a project because it has to be done for them. Same with the
Oh my
ventouse or
goodness.
forceps. You see these patterns coming out in life,
A
depending
hundred
on how they were
percent.
born. Some babies
Yeah.
are born really quickly, like almost too quickly, where mum's in shock, baby's in shock.
Yeah.
And those children are just like, they're just well ahead of themselves.
Yes.
They can't wait. They're just there. They just got to finish it, got to finish it, got to finish it.
Yeah.
So our pattern is set from the
Yeah.
very beginning. And
Gosh.
this is like it's not really out there. And people are afraid to have these conversations about that because we don't want people to feel guilty. We do the best we can with the situations we have and the knowledge and skills we've got at the time. But if we don't acknowledge it, how can we ever heal any of it?
No.
And
And
it
you're
isn't
right.
about blaming. Yeah.
No, it isn't about blaming, but you're right. We are scared to say, that we take on that our babies can pick up in utero things that we're going through, because then we don't want to say that to mothers because we're like, well, we don't want you to feel bad or feel guilty, but we can heal feeling bad and feeling guilty,
Yeah.
calm your nervous system down so that you are having, rather than just avoiding it because it's uncomfortable. So maybe we have to have a few more of these conversations and really start to get this message out as much as we possibly can. I mean, I had a million penny drop moments as I've got a huge family, and I remember even one my sister-in-law. It was 11:30. We were stood in her kitchen. She went, "I've gone into labour," and I was like, "Okay." That was 11:30. 1:45 in the afternoon, she was home with her baby. She was, and
Wow, that's the way to do it.
he is 100 miles and he's da, 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 da. He's like,
Yeah.
brr, and you're like, gosh, yeah, he was like, okay, it's time. She went to the hospital, she delivered him, she took him home, and I mean, it was her third baby, but yeah, and yeah,
Yeah.
having been induced with my pregnancy, and yeah, you cannot make that guy do anything he doesn't want to do,
No.
anything he doesn't want to do. He wasn't ready to come out and he was forced, and now he's just like slammed on the brakes in any
Yeah.
way, anything he doesn't want to do. So loads of penny drop moments for me personally. Wow. Man, we have to keep talking about this, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's hard because you don't want people to feel guilty, but if we don't bring awareness to it, we can't heal it. And it's
Yeah,
never, ever about blame. And the other thing I would say is, if women are going through a difficult time in pregnancy, it's just about connecting in with the baby and saying, I know things might not look great out here, but you are safe, you are loved, you are wanted. The baby just needs to feel safe, just like we need to feel safe during birthing and that they're welcome. Yeah.
they're
So,
welcome. Yeah.
yeah, because they're the key messages that came through certainly in my book is that we want to be loved, we want to feel like we belong, so and it's okay to have moments where something stressful
Of
happens,
course.
but then you're just, of course, life is can be stressful. It's when you've got more chronic. stress, can have more of an impact. But, reassuring the baby, talking to the baby, telling the baby, Dad and I had an argument today, but it isn't anything about you. It's
Yes.
nothing to do with you. Because
Yes.
babies just take on mother's emotions.
Yes. So you
Yeah.
can have a good old chat. I mean, I teach in my sessions, to have a conversation with yourself in your body, to, if you've got period pains, to have a conversation with your, to have a conversation with your womb, if you've got a poorly back or your sciatica or, whatever you've got going on, you can have. And I think, I was going to ask you, and I will, what we need in our society in terms of healing. But for me to answer my own question, it would be that connection and communication with the body, and then if you're pregnant, with the body and the baby. But what would you say? What would you add to that? What do we need in our society that we haven't already covered?
Well, I mean, it is about restoring this sacred to birth, motherhood, and womanhood. And as I said, it's all become medicalized to the point where women feel completely disempowered in their own bodies and their intuition. So bringing more intuition, more ceremony, and true support back into where, I mean, the work I'm doing, fertility and birth care. And I suppose really it's about recognizing that healing isn't just about the mind, it's also about the body and the soul. I mean, personally, I think, is this why we're in the state we're in? Because we divided the body and mind, and the poor old soul and spirit doesn't even get mentioned. And we're actually made of all three. So it's about bringing body, mind, and soul back together, really.
Yeah.
And I suppose the thing about trauma isn't that something you can simply talk about. You can't talk your way out of it. It needs to be processed on a much deeper sensory level. So if we integrate somatic healing, so body healing, with, along with ancestral wisdom, spiritual connection into mainstream approach to health, I think the impact could be profound.
Yes. And it would certainly
So
save the NHS a few pennies, huh?
exactly. So, but it's like we have to learn to listening to our bodies, our babies, and the wisdom that's come from our generations before us. And
Yeah.
I believe that when we do that, we don't just change our own lives, we'll change the world.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. Oh my goodness, Alison, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Is there anything else that you would like to add or bring up into conversation before we close?
Well, I thought I might ask you a question,
Oh,
actually.
ask away.
Um, Let me think. We talked about people suffering. So many people feel like they're stuck in their suffering and don't know where to start. So if you could offer just one simple, powerful practice for someone who's ready to shift but might feel overwhelmed, what would it be?
So I think a really, really beautiful place to start if you haven't done any work. So this is if you've like, I know I've got stuff going on inside me. I know maybe it affects my relationships. I don't know where to start. And just the thought of starting is making me anxious. I would say don't think about healing your wounds. I would say just have a look at havening to heal how scared it feels to begin the journey. Just start where you
Mm.
are. The actual very, very beginning of, I'm scared to start. That's where you start. You don't need to unpack, you will know that you have these things in your past. Sometimes you don't even know the things that you have in your past. And so there's this kind of rucksack that you mentioned, and the rocks in there. And the last thing you want to do is open them and get those rocks out. Don't just work on feeling resourced and calm and prepared to, if you want to, put that rucksack down. And then the process, right? You know that, oh, that's how you very gently open up something that's hurt you, because I opened up the fact, or made you anxious or triggered, because I've opened up and healed the fact that I was scared to even look.
Yeah,
Do you know
yeah.
what I mean?
Really powerful because it can be terrifying. The idea of healing can be terrifying. And so I just love that it's about helping people to just feel resourced, like just calm the nervous system down, isn't it? Beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, just start where you are. I'm scared to start, then don't start. Work on being scared to start. And then you've got the choice to choose.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you so much. What a lovely question.
Thank you. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. And so the book is called Baby Talk
Uh,
to Me,
Baby Talk to Me, Spirit Baby Messages for the Journey to Motherhood.
and we can find that on
So you'll find it on the socials. So I'm Alison Shaloe, .com. Also the Sacred Fertility and Birth Sanctuary.com. It's on there as well. Instagram, Alison Shaloe, or Sacred Fertility and Birth Sanctuary.
amazing. And in terms of what you can offer and how people can connect to you via the ways you've just said, but what would you be offering? What do you offer in terms of midwifery, private doulaing? Like what is it? Sessions, havening sessions, havening training. What is it that we can come and see you for?
So obviously, I'm working with women on their fertility journey, but since the babies, I've been more focused on women on their fertility journey because there's often layers of emotional stuff. Individual havening sessions. I do have a fertility alignment program, which is basically about looking at your own birth, doing some ancestral healing to clear the way for these new souls that are coming in because they don't want to carry the stuff we've carried. So they're asking us to do the healing. So that's included in it. Things like if there has been any birth trauma or miscarriage, just healing any of those experiences and healing any blocks using havening. That's a tool that I use to as to why you might not be getting pregnant, because sometimes it's not a physical reason, it's just that there's an emotional reason, or sometimes it's even ancestral. If there's been a death in childbirth, for example, it's like it's too scary to have a baby. I mean, that's just one of the things that often comes up with people. So it's a range of things. Obviously, I do breastfeeding and lactation as well. But with regards to havening, I do havening training if anyone is interested to learn about how to use this during their fertility. If you're a healthcare professional listening and you want to find ways to support women during the antenatal, postnatal, and birthing period, then I'm here, and also through fertility as well because stuff comes up. So
It
that's all
really
there on
does.
the website.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So the website once again is
It's www.alisonshaloe.com, and also the Sacred Fertility and Birth Sanctuary.com.
wonderful. Alison, you've been amazing. Thank you so much. And I really hope that we can have more conversations like this in the future and really start to hopefully see some changes. That would be nice, wouldn't it?
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jenna.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
sweetheart. Thank you so much.